Welcome back to another episode of Ask the Attorney. I'm your host, Alex Alexander with Client Focused Media. Today, I'm super excited to bring Will Parker from Beach Injury Lawyers, LLC. They can be found online at beachinjurylawyers.com. I love the name of that, by the way. Welcome, Will. How are you today?
Man, doing great. Excited to be on.
Awesome.
Beautiful day in South Carolina.
Love it. So obviously, Beach Injury Lawyers lends to the fact that you guys are located Myrtle Beach, but you're in Myrtle's Inlet, right?
That's right, Myrtle's Inlet, which is we would call it Myrtle Beach MSA. I mean, it's pretty close, but we are our current office location is about 3/4 of a mile from the ocean, so we love it.
Nice, excellent, good lunchtime walks. There you go. So. Let's I'm going to just dive right in. You and I talked a little bit before we came on, and you guys are it's a personal injury just by the name alone, right? Beach Injury Lawyers, your personal injury company. So the very first thing I'd like to ask is, what brought you to becoming a lawyer? And I think your story is pretty cool. So let's share it with the world.
Sure. So when I think about personal injury, I think about the word personal. I mean, because it is very personal to me. I was involved in a car accident when I was 13 years old, and my father ended up dying as a result of that accident. We were hit by a drunk driver. We experienced, a great deal of financial despair as a matter of what happened. My stepmother suffered some paralysis, and everyone in the car was injured. I had some immediate surgery, which I was fortunate to be alive. So I saw the devastating effects that it had on my family on both two fronts. On one, on obviously being injured, and the other on the financial side. And it was devastating, millions of dollars, and there was not anywhere near enough coverage.
So when you're talking about, you say enough coverage, right? So you're referring to typically someone else's insurance, right? That they're carrying when they're coming at you. You have an accident of some sort, and every state's different. Right, every state has different laws for uninsured motorists and underinsured motorists and that kind of stuff. Can you give us just a brief overview of South Carolina's?
Sure. Back then, it was $15,000 you were required to hold to be able to drive legally. Now the current minimum limits in South Carolina are $25,000, and you do have to carry $25,000 uninsured in case you're hit by someone who doesn't have insurance. So no matter what accident you're in, if one of the parties is insured, there'll be $25,000. Beyond that, it's up to you to cover yourself through underinsured coverage. And we typically see a good amount that we see is $100,000, and every vehicle that you have, you can stack that coverage. So if you have 3 vehicles, they each have $100,000. Then you can stack all 3, and you would have $300,000 in underinsured after the $25,000 is exhausted. So that's sort of a brief overview in South Carolina.
So the individual who comes to you, obviously they're not aware typically of how the laws work anyway, right? They're just a normal consumer. They're out doing their thing. Something happens in some sort, and you start speaking with them. What do you wish that 90% of the population understood?
I wish they understood the importance of underinsured when they had a choice to get it. I personally believe a lot of insurance companies don't push very hard to sell underinsured coverage, because that's where they end up paying out a lot more than on liability limits. So most people just don't understand, and they just think that it's supposed to that they're covered. I mean, because the most things in life with the government and we're sort of taken care of, and that's just not the case in automobile accidents or trucking accidents or any sort of personal injury.
And so we want people to understand that. I'm sure the very first thing is, if you're involved in an accident, let's say it's a slip and fall, right? Because this is real stuff, right? Sure. It's sort of, we'll call it premise liability. You and I will anyway. Most people won't, but a premise liability case. So I slip and fall somewhere. Let's say it's at a person's home, and there's something, some reason I had this accident, and it really wasn't my fault. People need to understand that you're not suing that person, right? You are
right. That becomes a real Right, that becomes a real issue. Either, yeah, if it's someone else's house that you don't want to sue them, and you're not. They have insurance for a reason. Same thing with automobile accidents. I actually have clients who do not want to make an underinsured claim because they don't want to make a claim against their own coverage. I'm like, that's why you have that coverage. So if you either don't have the coverage or use it when it's when you need to, because that's why you have it. But yeah, you're suing the insurance company essentially. I mean, the other person is named if there's a lawsuit, but the reality is the money is coming from an insurance company, and people just need to remember that. So not to make it so personal in that sense.
Going back to what you said about having the underinsured, right? So I have, obviously, in every state's different. I personally, I carry because I understand it. I have uninsured and underinsured both, right? And so
Sure.
my limits, I keep them kind of high because everything's expensive now. So
Right.
if something happens and I have to make a claim against that, my insurance company can't raise my rates for that because it's not an at fault. So can you talk about that a little bit?
Correct. That's one question we get a lot. Now, but I always tell clients they're not allowed to raise it because of that. But the accident in and of itself could cause the insurance companies to raise it. I had a buddy of mine call the other day. He's been in no accidents, and they raised his insurance premium $25 a month. And he asked for an explanation. They sent it back. They said inflation. So I mean, they can raise it for any reason they want. It technically, but they're not going to raise it because you made a claim where you were not at fault. That's why you have it.
And they can't cancel you because of that.
They can't say that. They can't say that. Kind of like in a right to work, right? State. I mean, they can't fire you for being injured, but they can fire you because you were late. I mean, they can come up with something else, but it's not going to be that. And I can tell you that most of the time when someone does end up with higher rates, or they call me and say their insurance company sent them a letter and they're not sure what to do, they generally find another insurance company at a much better rate anyway, because the other insurance companies are not going to look at it the same as the one who just had to pay out a bunch of money. So if you do have to change insurance companies, it's definitely worth it. I mean, it's usually you're going to save money and you get paid for all your medical, unless you want to pay all of your medical bills and it's really kind of a no-brainer. But sometimes you just have to explain it to people and face to face for them to get it.
So is this a service, and I understand it's not, but is this a service that you would provide if someone's like, hey, look, I have questions? Is this the kind of service that you would help them with, or do you have people that you would refer them to?
No, I would absolutely help anyone who has a question about their insurance policy. We've been able to speak in front of some groups and motorcycle groups and explain, hey, especially motorcycles, because the injuries are often a lot worse. It's just not protection. Right. And they tell them to wear a helmet. But yeah, I mean, we would absolutely love to. We've tried to find a way to get in front of more people, even maybe align with the insurance industry in some way. But a lot, that can get tricky because we're naturally opposed to each other in some cases.
Right. I'll tell you what, we're kind of running out of time today. I want to, first and foremost, I want to thank you for being on the show. And I want to thank everyone out there for tuning into this episode of Ask the Attorney. But before we go, if you are seeing this and you're in the state of South Carolina, especially in some place that's close to the beach lawyers, beach injury lawyers, I want you to reach out. I want you to reach out to Will Parker from Beach Injury Lawyers. They're at beachinjurylawyers.com. If you have questions about your insurance, he wants to answer questions. He's a person you should know. That way, if things do happen at any point in time, you already have someone in your pocket that can fight for you. So do that. Do something good for yourself and do something good for others. Have a great day.